Ruth's hands were trembling, her eyes wide as saucers. David's wallet had fallen to the floor, lying open right in front of her. Normally, she might never have looked, but that photograph was right there, out in the open, too exposed to be hidden. It was a wedding photo lying on the floor. David, in his suit, with a blonde woman beside him, in her white wedding dress, looking at him. Two small children stood at their feet, staring bewildered. June 1939 was written in the corner of the photograph, a photograph from 4 years ago. Last week, David had proposed to Ruth. "I want to build a life with you." "Ruth," he had said, looking into her eyes as if he were truly in love. But he already had a life. In America, a wife, 2 children, and now Ruth stood there, holding a wallet, 5 months of lies, and one enormous truth in her hand. You need to understand what rural England was like in March 1943. Small villages had been transformed by the American military presence, air bases, training grounds, thousands of young men far from home. Local girls were constantly warned about those American boys, attractive, generous, and usually lying about something. Ruth Patterson was 23 years old, working as a nurse at a small village hospital in Somerset. She had grown up in the village, studied nursing in Bristol, and returned home when the war started. Her fiancé Michael had been killed at Dunkirk in 1940. Since then, Ruth had focused on her work, helping wounded soldiers, surviving. David Thompson walked into her hospital on a cold March morning with a badly sprained ankle from a training exercise gone wrong. He was 28, a lieutenant in the U.S. Army Air Forces, with dark hair and an easy smile that reminded Ruth of movie stars. "I hope this doesn't require amputation," David joked as Ruth examined his ankle. "You'll live," Ruth said, "though you'll need to stay off it for a few days. Will you be my nurse for those few days? I'm everyone's nurse. That's how hospitals work." "Then I'm a lucky man." It was harmless flirting. Ruth had heard it from dozens of American soldiers. But there was something different about David. Less aggressive, more genuine. When he asked her questions about herself, he actually listened to the answers. During David's 3 days in the hospital, they talked constantly. They talked about his home in Ohio, her village, life before the war. David told her about his work as a teacher before joining the military, his love of baseball and hatred of jazz music, how he missed American coffee. "What about family?" Ruth asked on his last day at the hospital. "My parents are dead," David said. "My father died when I was young. My mother passed in 1941. I have no siblings. It's just me." "That must be lonely." "It is," David said, looking at her meaningfully. "But maybe it doesn't have to be." After David was discharged from the hospital, he kept finding excuses to visit Ruth. He would come to the village on his days off, meet her after shifts, and they would walk through the countryside. Their relationship developed quickly. By April, they were seeing each other whenever possible. In May, David was telling Ruth he loved her. By June, they were talking about marriage. "When the war is over," David said one evening, as they sat by the river, "come with me to America. I'll show you Ohio. It's beautiful in the fall. We'll buy a house near my old school. I can go back to teaching. You can work at the local hospital. We'll have a normal, peaceful life." "You're assuming I'll want to leave England?" Ruth said, but she was smiling. "I'm assuming you'll want to be with me. Geography is negotiable." Ruth rested her head on his shoulder. "What if your commander won't let you marry an English girl? Then I'll marry you anyway and deal with the consequences. I'm not going to lose you over paperwork." It felt too good to be true. And Ruth had learned that things that felt too good to be true during wartime usually were. But David seemed so sincere, so committed. He wrote her letters when he couldn't visit. He brought small gifts, chocolate from the PX, flowers from the countryside, a poetry book he had found. "My mother loved poetry," David said when he gave her the book. "I thought you might like it too." Ruth was falling in love. She knew it was fast. that it was wartime and emotions ran high, that she should be more careful. But knowing didn't change how she felt about David. David made her feel alive again, for the first time since Michael died. David proposed on July 10th, 1943. They were at the village dance, something organized by the Americans to build goodwill with the locals. The band was playing Glenn Miller, couples were dancing, and David led Ruth outside into the summer evening. "There's something I want to ask you," David said. "You're being transferred," Ruth said immediately. That was her first fear, that he would be sent away before they could build something real. "Not a transfer, not yet. Anyway, but Ruth, when I'm sent overseas, I want to be sure you'll wait for me. I want to know that when this war is over, we have a future together." He pulled out a ring, small, simple, but beautiful in the moonlight. "Ruth Patterson, will you marry me?" Ruth felt tears on her face. "Yes, yes, of course yes." David slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. Around them, other couples danced, laughed, lived in the brief moments of happiness that wartime allowed. "We'll get married before I ship out," David said. "Probably sometime in August or September. I'll talk to the chaplain tomorrow, start the paperwork. I'll write to my mother tonight," Ruth said. Her mother was living in Wales now, having moved there after Ruth's father died in 1942. "She'll want to come for the wedding. I can't wait to meet her. I can't wait for everyone to meet you, to know you're going to be Mrs. Thompson." "Mrs. Thompson." Ruth tried the name in her head and loved how it sounded. Ruth threw herself into wedding preparations. It would be small. Wartime weddings always were, but she wanted it to be special. She found fabric for a simple dress. She arranged the village church. She wrote to her mother with details. David seemed busy with military duties, and Ruth understood. He would visit when he could, but he was training for the eventual invasion of Europe. Everyone knew it was coming. The Americans were preparing to fight their way through France. "I wish we could have a proper honeymoon," David said one evening. "Take you to Paris, show you the Eiffel Tower, all that romantic nonsense. We'll have time for that after the war," Ruth said. "Right now, I just want to be your wife." David pulled her close. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in this war. Really the only good thing. Tell me about Ohio again," Ruth said. "The house we'll have. White paint, green shutters, a porch where we can sit in the evenings, a big kitchen where you can make those English breakfasts you always talk about, a yard where the kids can play. Kids? Eventually, if you want. I'd like at least 2, a boy and a girl. But we have time to figure that out." Ruth imagined it, a life in America, children, normalcy. It felt like a dream. But David made it seem possible. The wedding was set for August 28th. David visited Ruth on August 15th, bringing his dress uniform to show her. "I want to make sure it's perfect for the wedding," he said. "Can you check if anything needs adjusting?" Ruth took the uniform. "Let me take a look." She lifted the jacket, examining the fit. It looked good, but she noticed the pockets weren't quite aligned. As she adjusted them, David's wallet fell out and landed open on the floor. Ruth bent down to pick it up. "You should be more careful," she stopped. Behind the military ID, tucked into a small leather sleeve, was a photograph, a wedding photograph. David in a suit, younger but clearly him. Beside him, a blonde woman in a white wedding dress, her hand on his arm, both of them smiling at the camera. At their feet, 2 small children, a girl and a boy, maybe 3 and 1 in the photo. The photograph was creased, worn, clearly carried for years. Ruth stared at it. She turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, David and Barbara, June 1939. Emily and James, June 1939. 4 years ago, David had been married for at least 4 years. He had children, a family. Everything he had told her was a lie. Ruth raised her head from the photograph. David was sitting on her mother's couch, relaxed, unsuspecting. "David," Ruth said, her voice surprisingly calm. Who are Barbara, Emily, and James? She saw the exact moment he understood. His face went white. He stood up. Ruth, let me explain. Who are they? Ruth repeated, holding up the photograph. David's mouth opened and closed. Finally, he said quietly, my wife, my children. Ruth felt like the room was tilting. Your wife. Ruth, please, just let me explain. You told me you had no family. You said your parents were dead and you had no siblings. You said you were alone. My parents are dead. That part was true. But your wife isn't dead. Ruth's voice was rising now. Your children aren't dead. They're alive, and you were here proposing to me. We were planning a wedding, talking about our future. I can explain, David said desperately. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. Ruth threw the photograph at him. You're married. You have a wife and 2 children in America. And you've been lying to me for 5 months. David picked up the photograph from the floor. He looked at it, and something cracked in his face. Her name is Barbara, he said quietly. We got married in 1939. The kids, Emily is 4 now. James is 2. Barbara is in Ohio, living with her family. Why? Ruth asked. Why did you do this? Why did you propose to me when you have a family? Because I was tired of being that person. David's voice rose. I was tired of being the responsible husband and father, tired of Barbara's letters about bills and broken washing machines and Emily's school problems. I needed to be someone else for a while. Someone young and free, someone who could fall in love for the first time. Ruth stared at him. So what was I? A fantasy? An escape from your real life? No. God, no. Ruth, what I felt for you was real. I really do love you. You love me so much you were about to commit bigamy, Ruth said flatly. David was silent. Were you really going to marry me? Ruth asked. 2 weeks from now, stand in that church and marry me, with your wife and children waiting for you in Ohio. I don't know, David admitted. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I just kept telling myself I'd figure it out later, that something would happen to solve the problem. I'm not a problem to be solved, Ruth shouted. I'm a person who loved you, a person who was planning a future with you. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Ruth said. Sorry doesn't give me back 5 months of my life. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you lied to me every single day. Ruth sat down heavily. Her hands were shaking. Tell me the truth, all of it. I want to know exactly who you are. David sat down across from her. He looked defeated, suddenly aged. I married Barbara in 1939. I was 24. She was 21. We were in love, or I thought we were. Emily came right away, then James 2 years later. I was teaching history in high school. Barbara stayed home with the kids. It was fine. It was normal. Then the war started. David continued, and I enlisted. Partly patriotism, partly I wanted out. I wanted adventure. I wanted to feel like more than just a teacher from Ohio with a mortgage and dirty diapers. So you came to England and decided to pretend you were single, Ruth said bitterly. At first, I wasn't pretending anything. I was just here, training, trying to survive. But then I met you, and you were everything Barbara wasn't. You're smart and fun, and I don't have to fix things or make decisions. You're independent. Being with you made me feel like a different person. A better person. A person who lies to women and hides his wife while proposing, Ruth said. David flinched. Yes. What were you going to do after the wedding? Ruth asked. Were you going to tell Barbara? Divorce her and bring the children to live with us? Or were you just going to have 2 wives on different continents and hope nobody noticed? I don't know, David said again. I wasn't thinking. I was just living in the moment, pretending the future didn't exist. Well, it does exist, Ruth said. And you have a wife and children, and I'm done playing your game. She pulled off the engagement ring and threw it at him. Go, get out of my house and never come back. David left. Ruth sat in the empty house, her mother's house, where she'd lived since returning to the village, and stared at the wall. 5 months, 5 months of being in love, making plans, believing in a future. All of it built on lies. She thought about Barbara in Ohio. Did she know her husband was proposing to other women? Did she suspect? Or was she sitting there with 2 small children, writing letters about broken washing machines, completely unaware that her husband was trying to build a new life without her? Ruth felt sick, not just for herself, but for Barbara, for the children who had a father who preferred to pretend they didn't exist. She noticed the dress uniform still hanging on the chair. David had left without taking it. Ruth grabbed it, went outside, and threw it in the trash. Then she went back inside, locked the door, and cried for everything she had lost. Ruth didn't go to work for 3 days. She couldn't face people, couldn't pretend everything was fine. She stayed home, replayed every moment of the last 5 months, searched for the signs she had missed. There had been signs, small ones. David was never eager to talk much about his past. Questions about his childhood were deflected with jokes. He never talked about friends from home, neighbors, people he grew up with. He was vague about addresses, about exactly where in Ohio he was from. Ruth had noticed these things but explained them away. He was private. He was focused on the present. He was a man living in the moment. She had been so foolish. Her friend Susan came on the 3rd day, having heard Ruth was sick. "What's wrong? Is it serious?" Ruth almost didn't tell her, almost made up a story about the flu. But she was tired of lies, her own or anyone else's. "David is married," she said flatly. "He has a wife and 2 children in America. I found their wedding photo in his wallet." Susan sat down slowly. "Oh, Ruth, I'm so stupid. 5 months. I spent 5 months with him. He proposed. We were getting married in 2 weeks. You're not stupid," Susan said firmly. "He's a liar. This is his fault, not yours. I should have seen it. I should have known." "How?" Susan interrupted. "How could you have known? He lied about everything. You can't blame yourself for believing someone who deliberately deceived you." Ruth knew Susan was right, but it didn't make her feel less foolish. David wrote to Ruth. The first letter came on August 21st. Ruth almost burned it without reading, but a morbid curiosity won. "Dear Ruth, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to understand one thing. Everything I felt for you was real. Every moment we spent together, every word I said about loving you, all of it was genuine. Yes, I lied about being married. Yes, it was wrong, but I wasn't lying about my feelings. Please give me a chance to explain properly. Please let me see you one more time. David." Ruth burned the letter. The second letter came 2 days later. "Ruth, I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I'm not claiming to be the victim here. I just want you to know why I did it. Being with you made me feel like the person I always wanted to be. Barbara and we've been drifting apart for years. The marriage is dead. The only thing holding us together is the kids and the war. When I'm overseas, I can't leave her, but when this is over, I will. I'll divorce her. And if you'll give me another chance..." Ruth burned that letter too. The third letter came on August 25th, 3 days before their wedding was supposed to be. "I'm being transferred. I'm shipping out to Europe next week. I don't know when I'll be back, if I'll be back. I need to see you before I go. Please, just once. Let me apologize properly. Let me say goodbye. I'll be at the riverbank, where I proposed at 6 p.m. on August 27th. If you don't come, I'll understand, but I hope you will. David." Ruth stared at that letter for a long time. Part of her wanted to go. She wanted to yell at him, make him understand the damage he had caused. She wanted closure, whatever that meant. But another part of her knew that seeing him wouldn't accomplish anything. He would apologize, make excuses, maybe cry, and then he would leave, go back to his wife or not. and Ruth would still be left picking up the pieces either way. She burned the letter with the others. What Ruth didn't know was that while David was writing to her, he was also writing to Barbara, and Barbara was writing back. Barbara Thompson, 26 years old, was living with her family in Columbus, Ohio, raising Emily and James mostly alone. David's military pay came regularly, but even in his letters home, he was emotionally absent. Barbara's letters to David were dutiful, newsy, filled with small domestic details. Emily lost another tooth. James is talking more now. He asks about you every night. The car broke down again. Your father's watch stopped working. I miss you. David's letters back were brief, distant. Glad the kids are doing well. Sorry about the car. I'll send more money when I can. Training keeps me busy. Stay strong. In July, Barbara began to suspect something was wrong. David's letters became even more infrequent. When he did write, they felt mechanical, obligatory. He stopped asking about the kids. He stopped saying he missed her. Barbara wrote to one of David's fellow officers, someone she had met when David was stateside. Is David all right? His letters seem strange. Is he in danger? The officer wrote back carefully. David seems fine. He's made friends here. Maybe too many friends. It might be good if you wrote to him directly about it. Barbara understood. She wasn't stupid. Military wives knew what too many friends meant. Their husbands were spending time with local women. In early August, she wrote David a confrontational letter. Are you seeing someone? Be honest with me. I need to know what's happening. David's response came 3 weeks later. Don't be paranoid. I'm focused on the war. Nothing else. But he didn't say no. Barbara noticed that. Ruth made a decision on August 26th. She was going to tell someone official about David, not to get him in trouble, though she wanted that too, but because other women needed to know what he was. She went to the American base and asked to speak with the chaplain. Chaplain Brooks was a kindly-faced man in his 50s who had counseled dozens of couples in hasty wartime romances. How can I help you, miss? Ruth told him everything. About David, about the proposal, about finding the wedding photo. I thought you should know, in case he tries this with someone else. Chaplain Brooks looked genuinely distressed. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Unfortunately, you're not the first woman to come here with this story. He's done this before. Not David specifically, but soldiers in general. We try to screen them to make sure married men aren't deceiving local women, but some of them lie. We'll add David's name to our watch list. If he tries to get married through military channels, we'll catch it. What about his wife? Ruth asked. Does she know what he's been doing? I don't know. Would you like me to contact her? Ruth thought about it. Barbara Thompson, sitting in Ohio with 2 small children, maybe suspecting her husband was unfaithful, but not knowing for sure. Did she deserve to know the truth? Yes, Ruth said. She should know. If he was willing to propose to me while married to her, he'll do it to someone else. Chaplain Brooks nodded. I'll write to her, discreetly. She deserves to know the truth. Ruth didn't go to the river on August 27th. Instead, she went to work, took extra shifts at the hospital. She needed to stay busy, to be useful, to not think about David. She wondered if he actually went, if he stood there at sunset, hoping she would appear, if he felt anything resembling the pain she felt. Probably not. People like David, people who could lie so completely for so long, probably didn't feel things the way normal people did. Susan came by that evening with news. I heard David Thompson shipped out today. His unit was transferred. They're going to Europe within the week. Good, Ruth said. Are you okay? I will be. Eventually, Susan hugged her. You know what I think. You dodged a bullet. Imagine if you'd married him and found out later. Imagine being legally tied to him. I know. I'm lucky. But she didn't feel lucky. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and foolish. Barbara Thompson received Chaplain Brooks's letter in early September. She opened it while Emily and James were playing in the yard. expecting another military communication about David's pay or transfer location. Instead, she read, "Dear Mrs. Thompson, I'm writing about a situation involving your husband, Lieutenant David Thompson. He was in a romantic relationship with a local English woman and proposed marriage to her. The woman only discovered he was married by chance. Your husband told her he was single and had no family. I thought you deserved to know this information. The relationship has ended, and Lieutenant Thompson has been transferred. If you wish to take any action, please contact me, Chaplain Brooks." Barbara read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it very carefully, put it in her desk drawer, and continued making dinner. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just felt a cold clarity settle over her. David had proposed to another woman. He had planned to commit bigamy. He had told someone that Emily and James didn't exist. That night, after the children were asleep, Barbara wrote 2 letters. The first was to David. "I received a letter from Chaplain Brooks. I know about the English woman. I know you proposed to her. I know you told her you were single. I want a divorce. When you return from Europe, don't come home. I'll have the papers drawn up. The children and I will be fine without you. We've been fine without you for 2 years, Barbara." The second was to her lawyer. "I need to begin divorce proceedings regarding my husband. He's currently serving overseas. I have grounds, adultery, and attempted bigamy. Please advise on how to proceed." She mailed them both the next morning. David received Barbara's letter in October, somewhere in southern Italy. He read it once, then put it in his pocket and didn't respond for 2 weeks. When he finally wrote back, it was brief. "I understand you're angry. I deserve it. But don't make any decisions yet. Let's talk about this when I get home. The children need their father." Barbara didn't respond. David also wrote to Ruth, but the letters were returned unopened. Eventually, he stopped trying. He spent the war. Italy, France, Germany mechanically. He did his job, followed orders, made no friends. The other soldiers learned not to talk to him much. He was moody, withdrawn, difficult. In March 1945, 2 months before Germany surrendered, David was wounded in a bombing. Not badly, but enough to send him to a field hospital. While there, he wrote one last letter to Ruth. "I don't expect you to respond. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that you were right about me. I really am a coward who tried to escape reality by pretending to be someone else. But what I felt for you wasn't pretend. It was the realest thing I'd felt in years. I'm sorry I ruined it. I'm sorry I hurt you. You deserved so much better. I hope you find it." David, he never sent that letter. He kept it in his pocket, folded next to the wedding photo of Barbara and the children. 2 different lives, 2 different versions of himself. Neither quite real. Ruth didn't date for the rest of the war. She focused on her work, her patience, getting through each day. People in the village knew about David. Gossip had spread quickly, but they were kind about it. "You're better off," her patient said. "That American was trouble. You'll find the right person," the vicar said. An honest one. Ruth wasn't sure she wanted to find anyone. The betrayal had made her cautious, suspicious. She found herself questioning everything people told her, looking for the lies underneath. In 1944, she met Thomas, a local farmer who had been exempted from military service due to a medical condition. He was quiet, steady, completely transparent about his life. She said yes on the 3rd dinner invitation. "I need you to understand something," Ruth told him on their first date. "I was engaged before to an American soldier who turned out to be married. I have a hard time trusting people now." "That's understandable," Thomas said. "Would it help if I showed you my birth certificate, school records, and statements from everyone who's known me for the last 20 years? He was joking, but Ruth said, "Actually, yes, it would." Thomas laughed, but then he actually did it. Over the next few weeks, he introduced her to his entire family, his neighbors, childhood friends. He showed her every aspect of his life, proved he was exactly who he said he was. They married in 1946. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was slow, careful, built on verified truth instead of believed promises. Ruth loved Thomas, but differently than she had loved David. More carefully, more guardedly, never quite allowing herself to believe completely. David returned to America in July 1945. He went to Columbus, where Barbara was still living with her family. She had filed for divorce, but not finalized it, waiting for him to return. "I want to see the children," David said. "No," Barbara said simply. "You told someone they didn't exist. You were willing to pretend they were never born. You don't get to be their father anymore. Barbara, please, sign the papers. Give me full custody. Pay child support. That's all I want from you." David signed. The divorce was finalized in August 1945. He moved to California, as far from Ohio as he could get. He became a teacher again, never remarried, lived alone. His daughter Emily tried to contact him once in 1957 when she was 18. He wrote a letter, tried to explain, tried to apologize. She never responded. David died in 1960 at 45. Heart attack. His obituary listed no survivors, no family, just David Thompson, teacher, veteran, private ceremony. Ruth lived until 1985. She had 3 children with Thomas, 6 grandchildren. She lived a good, honest life built on transparent foundations. In 1983, 40 years after finding that photograph, Ruth was sorting through old papers when she found it. She didn't even remember saving it. David and Barbara, 1939, Emily and James at their feet. Her granddaughter Emma, 18 years old, found her looking at it. "Who's that?" "Grandma?" Ruth considered lying, considered saying it was nobody, just an old photo, but she had built her life on honesty, on truth. "This is a man I almost married during the war. He told me he was single. He wasn't." "That's terrible," Emma said. "What happened to him?" "I don't know. I never saw him again." Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if he had been telling the truth? Ruth thought about it. No, because if he had been telling the truth, he wouldn't have been David. Lying was part of who he was. You can't separate the lie from the person when lying is that fundamental. She handed the photograph to Emma. "Keep this as a reminder that people can lie about everything, even while looking you in the eye, even while you're wearing the ring they gave you, even while you're standing in your mother's living room planning a wedding." "How do you trust anyone then?" Emma asked. "Carefully," Ruth said. "You trust carefully, slowly, with verification. You trust people who show you their truths instead of telling them to you. And you never, ever assume that love makes someone honest. Sometimes love just makes people better liars. You need to understand something about discovering a lie. It's not just about what you learn. It's about what you realize you never knew. Ruth didn't just discover that David was married. She realized that she had been in love with a fiction, a character that David created for her. The real David, the man who married Barbara at 24, who had 2 children, who taught history to high school students in Ohio, that person was never in Ruth's living room. She never met him. She only knew the version of David that existed for her, the single lieutenant without family complications who could promise her forever. That's what makes this kind of betrayal so devastating. You don't just lose a person, you lose the entire reality you thought you were living in. You wake up and realize you've been unknowingly participating in a fiction for months. David probably told himself he was different people in different places. A husband and father in Ohio, a free bachelor in England. But you can't compartmentalize truth that way. Eventually, all the different versions collide, and someone gets erased in the collision. In this case, Ruth got erased. Barbara got erased. Emily and James grew up with an absent father who chose lies over family. And David? He erased himself. He spent the last 15 years of his life alone. teaching other people's children, while his own forgot his face. He died at 45, with no one to mourn him because he had abandoned everyone who might have loved him. All because he wanted to be someone else for a while. All because carrying a wallet with a wedding photo felt like too much weight. Ruth kept that photograph until she died, not as a memento of love, but as a reminder that sometimes the most important truths are things hidden in people's pockets, folded and worn, waiting to be discovered by accident. She kept it to remember that she survived discovering the truth. That afterward, she built a real life with a man who showed her his entire wallet, his entire past, his entire truth before asking her to love him. That photograph sat in Ruth's desk drawer for 42 years. When she died, Emma found it again. The ink had faded, the paper yellowed, but the image was still clear. David and Barbara, 1939, 2 children at their feet. 4 people whose lives were shaped by one man's inability to be honest. Emma framed it and hung it on her wall, not as decoration, but as a reminder of what her grandmother taught her, that trust is built on verification, that love requires honesty, and that sometimes the most important thing someone can show you is proof that they're telling the truth. The wedding that never happened in August 1943 shaped the rest of Ruth's life, not because of what she lost. David was never real, but because of what she learned. Discovering a lie is painful, but building a life on verified truth is worth the extra care. David spent his life being different people in different places. Ruth spent hers being exactly who she said she was, demanding the same from everyone around her. In the end, Ruth had 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and a husband who loved her honestly for 39 years before she died. David had no one. This story taught me that David dying with no one may not seem like punishment, but it appears as an ending in the story's conclusion, a bitter ending. Everything built on lies eventually collapses, causing lies to be exposed. But truths are not like that. What is built remains a masterpiece. I love you all very much. Rest assured that the next content will be emotional, meaningful, and once again surprising with endings just as you know. Goodbye.